Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I have Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on the show. We're recording this Monday afternoon, 3:30, 3:15-ish, our time out on the West Coast. Why so late on a Monday? It's because we had a press conference with new Oregon head football coach Dan Lanning. We felt like it would be opportunistic to do it after that instead of before it, and we've got a lot. We've learned a lot about this coaching hire. Rob Mullins, Oregon's athletic director, fielded questions. President Schill also spoke. He did not field questions, but he did speak about the hire. And then obviously Dan Lanning presented his opening remarks and then fielded questions for about 15 or 20 minutes with the media. Overall vibe, I mean, it's easy to win these press conferences, right? But I think you come out of this feeling very excited.
I can't think of a time where you felt like a coach just lost the press conference. I guess they would have to just maybe they get the school's name wrong or can't remember what job they're taking. What was that, Jared? Is there an example of that?
No, I didn't have one, but it would be bad if they forgot the school name.
Yeah, I'm like, and I'm not trying to diminish at all because I think Jared, actually, you said it best right afterwards as we were walking to go interview Alex Forsyth of I would run through a wall for that man or something along those lines. And I feel like that was the way most people there obviously kind of felt. I mean, you could sort of feel the energy and the juice. You understood. I will say this. It's one thing to read about him and even watch interviews and see how he interacts with players from afar. It's another thing to kind of experience it in person. And you get that feel from him. He's a high energy. He's young. He's motivated. Smart guy, very savvy. I thought he answered questions really well, always had the right thing to say. People kind of put me on blast for how he cut me off and informed me that he had coached a third grade boys basketball team, and he does have head coaching experience. I thought he always had kind of the right, felt like he was well prepared for this. It felt like he kind of knew what was coming his way. He understood the questions would be lack of experience. What kind of coaching hires do you need to make? Why are you ready for this? Like these kind of things he was prepared for. And I thought he handled himself really well. And as Jared said, and I'll let him kind of convey why he was ready to run through a wall for him. But I just think you got a sense of who he is and how he interacts with human beings. And obviously it's one thing to hold a press conference. It's another thing to coach a football team. Those are different relationships you have. But I just thought you got a pretty early indication of who Dan Lanning is. And everything I came away with was really positive. Great high energy guy. Again, I thought he was ready for basically everything. And you got a sense he was ready to get to work. And that was the thing talked about throughout, was just ready to kind of get the ball rolling. So I'll send it to you, Jared, for kind of, again, your opening kind of assessments of him and why you were so impressed with what he had to say and how he carried himself.
Yeah, I think the getting to work part was the primary reason behind all of it. He knew what he was doing. He was there. I think some of the concerns going into this was that, he was a defensive coordinator. He doesn't talk a lot. He's not going to go into the media too often. He handled himself great. And this is a 35-year-old coach. I think he talked about it himself and was asking questions. Just, he's a young guy. And to get up there and to talk how he did with his type of public speaking was, really honestly spoke volumes about who he is as a character and as a human being. A couple more just character human being things. He was very appreciative of his family, shared his family story about how he and his wife Sophia met at Outback Steakhouse, where he was a busboy and she was a to-go order deliverer person.
That's what he said.
So yeah, I thought that was cute, honestly, big softy. And that shows a lot about who he is. But yeah, the reason I was willing to run through a wall for the guy was he just seemed like a great motivator. At the end of the day, it was just one of those speeches where you can sit there, and if you're a competitive human, you have any competitive nature like me, as Erik can attest to on the basketball court, he's one of those guys that you will want to go and play for, want to go and run through a wall for, and try your best and just be as good as you can be. So I think he's a great individual, and I think he can be somebody who can carry the program into a different level and just pick up where Oregon has seemingly left off.
Really interesting comments, I think, from athletic director Rob Mullins in his opening speech, as well as when he fielded questions afterwards. And then during Dan Lanning's time when he was speaking, and the reference to the blueprint, the plan, the system. And I think that was in reference to what we all know about. Ultimately, it goes back to Nick Saban and the blueprint that he built to run that program, to build that program, that Kirby Smart brought from Alabama with Dan Lanning and as an assistant coach for him to Georgia. And then Lanning has continued to learn and go through that blueprint, if you will, at Georgia. I wrote in my notes as he was talking, I kept feeling a different coach than Mario Cristobal, but a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same direction and the focuses. And this is why I think this was probably a very attractive hire, is they have something in place right now. And this is a man that, while there's tweaks, he wants to put his own spin on it. He's familiar with what this program is set up with. He's familiar with what this program wants to accomplish, and he's familiar with how to accomplish these goals. And I think it's a very good fit for where this program is today and where they want to go and where he's coming from.
I've been thinking about this as I was driving home of what felt similar. I think it's because it was, and this gets back to Saban, process-oriented thinking, not results-oriented thinking. And that is very much a Nick Saban staple. That's how he operates. It's all about the process of getting there. And if you follow the steps of the process, the result will be what you desire it to be. And that was one of the very first things Lanning said. He said it during a speech. He said it during answers of questions of, this program will aspire for big things, but it will be methodical in how it gets there, and it won't skip steps. They will do things the right way. They will do things with the right process in mind to get the right results. And he spoke with somebody who has great confidence in doing that. And he spoke as somebody who has very high aspirations. We'll get to some of the other things he had to say, but talking about recruiting, he was saying we can go out and get the very best. That's a thing that I think make Oregon fans' ears perk up a little bit, because that's been a concern of, okay, what's the next step here? Mario Cristobal is such an incredible recruiter. Will it continue to be under Dan Lanning? Well, we'll have to see what the results are, but he certainly speaks like somebody who has a plan in place. And I think that is ultimately why you feel pretty darn good about this, is the process-driven stuff, but also, like I think Jared alluded to it earlier, it didn't feel like it was a rudderless ship at all. It feels like somebody it doesn't feel like a 35-year-old head coach. It feels like somebody who knows what he wants to do. He's confident in it, and he's prepared to take those steps in elevating this program. And I think he used some of the same kind of nomenclature that Mario talked about, the Oregon standard, upholding that, how that will be a vital part from a day-to-day basis. He spoke in some of the same terms, and I think Matt is right. You can see some of the maybe fingerprints of the Nick Sabans and the Kirby Smarts and these elite coaches that have prepared him to get to this point. And I thought it was notable that when I did ask him about kind of some of that lack of experience part, he did point to, well, I've had quality experience. And he pointed to the experience he had working under Nick Saban and under Kirby Smart and Mike Norvell and all of these other coaches he's worked for. I think you get a sense that we're going to learn a lot more about what a football program looks like under him going forward. We're going to learn more about how he works as a talent acquisition, right? What kind of coach he is, X's and O's, all of these kind of things we'll learn. But we've learned right now the baseline, kind of the foundation, is built on a lot of the same things that Mario Cristobal preached and talked about. And that's why I think you have to have optimism for this transition to go pretty smoothly, because if you're an Oregon football player sitting up there listening, and obviously they heard Dan Lanning speak before, I think you come away going, okay, I'm kind of familiar with a lot of what you're talking about. This doesn't sound totally foreign. And I think that's certainly a positive thing. And for me, gives me even a little more optimism that this won't be a challenging transition from Cristobal to Lanning. I think a lot of this will carry over kind of seamlessly. And of course, with Dan Lanning's spin put on it as well.
I mean, if there is a culture to try and replicate in college football, it's Saban. I mean, it's just a proven winner wherever he goes. And obviously, he was only a grad assistant for 1 year. Lanning was under Saban in 2015. But, he learned directly from Kirby Smart, who's another Alabama disciple, who was Alabama's defensive coordinator for 7 or 8 years. And Kirby Smart, you look what he's doing down in Georgia. Like, he is trying to replicate what Alabama does. And that's not a bad thing to do. That's what Mario is trying to do at Oregon. Not a bad thing to do. And for him to be 35 and, have this opportunity at a job, he was in the running at Oklahoma as well. I understand why people have worried about the no head coaching experience other than his third grade basketball team, which apparently was damn good. I don't buy it. Why? Because when you're 35 and you have this opportunity, people can see through that. And Erik, I think you alluded to this on a previous podcast where it's like everybody at one point doesn't have head coaching experience. And sure enough, they get there. Same thing with Dabo Sweeney and Kirby Smart. Like those guys weren't head coaches before they took over at Clemson and Georgia. And this is, Dan Lanning's opportunity. And for him to come in here and have the same type of same type of mentality and same phrases almost as Cristobal, like I'm not surprised to hear that. It wasn't surprising at all, just because they both learned under the same people. Mario is older and he has more experience doing under those guys as well, and more experience under Jimmy Johnson at Miami too, which is another help. But again, I'm not surprised to hear that they have the same idea, the same drive and passion to get the process correct, because the process ultimately results in wins and success. So for Oregon to go from Cristobal to Lanning and have this change of philosophy not be a significant change is huge. And again, we'll see how Lanning puts his twist on it, like Erik said. But I think it'll be a good transition from here on out, especially after hearing him talk today.
He spoke. We asked him about just staffing and how does he go about filling out this staff? What's he looking for in his coaching staff? Because look, signing day is less than 48 hours away, and recruits will start signing with schools across the country. I'm sure Oregon's going to have a couple guys. You've got to start building this program. You've got to start filling out its staff and developing its identity and getting yourself ready to go for next season. And he talked about the importance to move quickly, but I really liked that he addressed the fact that they're just not going to hire somebody, and it's going to have to be the right guy. And he's willing to wait. And I think that's something to read into here a little bit. If you're familiar and you're following this coaching search for him filling out his staff, he's willing to wait and take his time if it means getting the right guy. And by the way, he's been building a list of guys he wants to target ever since he was a GA.
I loved that part. And we did get a hint of that. I'm just going to reference the Twitter space thing that Rob Mullins said, I guess, shortly after the hire on Saturday. He made a comment of, I'll let Dan kind of fill you on this, but he's been working towards being a head coach, and he's been working towards filling out a staff for a while. And it was interesting to hear from Dan. Like he said, when he was a GA at Arizona State, this was a decade ago, he was 26 years old, 25 years old, something like that at the time. Obviously a head coaching position, not on the horizon, not a clear destination. That's where he's going to get. Certainly not this quick. The fact that he, at that point, already had the wherewithal, or that pretty clearly says, this is who this guy is. These are his goals. This is how much of a forward thinker he is. That he had already said he got in his iPhone, notes app, and I was already putting together names. And he says he's been adding, subtracting for the last 10 years to get to this point. He said it's a long list. As Matt said, it's not a list he's going to run through really quickly. We know, obviously, the Kenny Dillingham news from earlier this weekend, potential offensive coordinator, currently at Florida State, somebody he has previous work history with, has been offered the offensive coordinating job. It sounds like we're still kind of in a waiting pattern with that. There was word from Brandon Marcello, 247 Sports, on Sunday that decision might be made Monday morning. It's now Monday afternoon. No decision has been made. So that's just kind of the only real hiring news we have to discuss. But I just think you get a sense that the staff he puts together is going to be one that comes with a lot of thought put behind it. I don't think he's not going to rush it. And he's obviously put a lot of thought already into the type of people he wants to surround himself with, like-minded people. I think we'll see a younger staff than you're probably used to seeing at this level. I wouldn't be surprised if there are multiple 35 and under coaches on the staff. And I think that's a good thing. That provides you a bunch of youth. That provides you people that are hungry. That provides you people that maybe have a different way of looking at the world. and seeing things. I mean, I think like a Dillingham, and we're not sure if he's going to be on the staff or not, but that guy's been an offensive coordinator. I know he hasn't been calling plays, but that guy's been an offensive coordinator at big Power 5 SEC caliber football, ACC caliber football since he was in his late 20s. I mean, that to me tells you a lot. And that was part of the reason with Lanning as well, of like these people that traverse and they go on this upward trajectory at such young ages and accomplish so much. That's telling to me. And I'm not going to be surprised.
Behind it.
Yeah. And it's not like these decisions, not like he's being handed these jobs by people who don't know anything. Kirby Smart decided he was worthy of being a head coach or a defensive coordinator. And then Rob Mullins decided he was worth of being a head coach. Dillingham, same thing at Florida State, right? There are smart people, smart football people working there. Norvell is a smart guy. He's not going to just hand somebody the keys if he doesn't think he's capable. And so I'm anticipating that this staff, when we get more clarity from it, is going to be one that excites a lot of people. And I think it's going to be one that's very forward thinking is sort of my early kind of indications. And he did communicate a desire to, that previous working experience. He didn't say it was a requirement. It doesn't have to be somebody he's worked with, but you did get a sense that will play some role into this. So, Matt already has a great list up on duckterror.com. We'll do a good job of covering the next week's forward when he fills out the staff. But I think you get a sense that looking at some of the staffs at Arizona State when he was at GA, or at Memphis when he was, his first position coaching job, or at Georgia, or even at Alabama, those are kind of names to know. And again, Matt has done a good job of compiling a pretty exhaustive list on the site to look at.
I thought it was really interesting that he had that whole list from his days at ASU. That tells you a lot about who he is. He's always looking to move upward. And this is one of those stages where he has moved seemingly to a top level. And now he has the ability to go out and get exactly who he wants. You mentioned that there's a whole list that you can't really get, but he is now in a position with tremendous resources that the University of Oregon and their football program provide to really go get his number one guy. And if that's Dillingham from Florida State, he can go try. But that's the whole point. He's going to go make an effort to try to land somebody that he knows and that he thinks that can help him out in this program. And for his hiring in the future, in terms of just filling out the staff, and Oregon's still not exactly sure who's going and staying for Oregon and following Mario to Miami. I feel pretty good and pretty confident about Lanning's ability to fill out the rest of the staff, just because of he's been waiting for this. He's been wanting this opportunity to be this type of human and be the head coach at a big football program. And here he is. And a lot of people worried about his youth because of his connection ability. I think that was something that Mario had well under his belt, where he could go out and make these connections because he has coached for so long at so many different schools and, was offensive line coach at Alabama, stuff like that. Dan Lanning's been around the block too. He's got Arizona, Sam Houston State, Memphis, Georgia, now at Oregon. He's got his own bunch of connections too, and it might just be on that Notes app. But I think that's going to be a frequently visited app in the following weeks for Dan, and he's going to be making a few phone calls.
One note we should note of salary pool and whatnot. Rob Mullins, Oregon's athletic director, did say that the $9 or $10 million buyout that Miami will pay to Oregon, that money will go directly into the athletic department's funds, and then they'll start dispersing that throughout. So it's not going to be a case where Dan Lanning gets $10 million and decides at his disposal where that money goes. Mullins noted that's not how the athletic department operates in any capacity. For any coach or for any situation. So that money will go into the fund, and then that money will be dispersed what's best for the overall athletic department. He did note that they severely that they have invested a lot of resources, and they will continue to invest a lot of resources into the football program. So I think there's probably a good chance that some of that will go towards assistant coaches and other ways to help the football program, but it'll also go to help paying other areas of the athletic department, especially when they went through COVID-19 and the impacts that had on the football program. I think we should note as well that there was points in time in this press conference, I think he was speaking to players that were in the auditorium listening to him give this press conference. He wasn't he was asked questions by us, but he was looking at the team, and he had messages of service, how him as a head coach, him hiring his future coaches will be there ultimately to service the players and to help them become football players, better football players. Also, more importantly, he said better people, better men when they leave the football program. I think there was also a point in time where he made some acknowledgments to the past and the players that have come before this current group of teammates, and acknowledging the work that they've done. I think he referenced, the lunch pail work ethic that, of the past will be part of this football program moving forward. So I think there were some little moment there where he was asked by us, talking to current players, asked by us, and speaking to those that have come before him about how he's going to be running this football program.
These are early days for him, and it's important he sends messages to those players he's coaching, right? I mean, he even said it. He's addressed the team. He hasn't spoken with everybody individually. That's something that's going to happen in the future. He's still trying to develop these relationships. He's still trying to prove and show to these players who he is, just as much as he's being introduced to those listening that are fans or donors or, family members of players or what have you. And he's being introduced to us as media the first time we had a chance to interact with him. He's still really early in his infancy stages, I guess, if you will, with relationships with these players. I mean, I would imagine very few of them had any previous relationship with Dan Lanning. I asked Alex Forsythe, when was the first time you knew who Dan Lanning was? And he said midway through the season, they were talking about Georgia and they had this great defense, and this defensive coordinator was turning eyes, and they had kind of heard his name then. And then once that name popped up as a name that maybe would be at Oregon, people got pretty excited because they'd already knew who he was. But it's not like Dan Lanning was a name. It's not like they knew what Dan Lanning, first off, it's not like they knew who he was 6 months ago. And it's not like they knew who he stood, what he stood for 6 months ago. And it certainly isn't like they have a full, clear image of who he is now. So of course he's going to spend some time in this press conference saying, hey guys, this is a message to you. And you're right, Matt, you could see where his eyes were at. Sometimes he was looking directly at us when we asked questions. Other times he was looking above us because there were, I don't know, how many players do you think were there? 40, 50 players, something like that? A pretty good percentage of the football team was seated above us, along with some donors and family of people. And we should mention his wife was there, and his 3 sons were there, and all sorts of, integral parts of this program were there. But I do think he made an effort to look up and say, hey guys, this message is to you because it's important. Because ultimately, as he said, he is a servant to them. And ultimately his success and his success the program is going to have is dependent upon the guys he's looking up at. So I think he understands that. I don't think he's under any illusion that Oregon football is dependent upon Dan Lanning being successful. In fact, he said, I'm going to take 0 snaps next year for this football team, right? He made note of that. He understands the players that are going to ultimately make this go. He understands who those people are, and he made an effort to communicate some things to them.
I thought one of the most important things was, very early on in his press conference where he talked to former players, and he said, I am a servant to you, whether I've coached you or not. We want you to know that this program you can be proud of and be a part of. I think that's an important thing. We've had the letter come out recently, and that's a whole different topic that we'll get into eventually. But I think that's what a lot of former players want to hear. A lot of alumni want to hear that. And I think there's no doubt that down at Georgia, alumni are a huge and integral part of that football program. Whether they're hired by the team, they go to every game, their sons play on the team, something like that. And I think Lanning to go out in his introductory press conference and within the first 2 minutes, the first minute and a half of his entire speech, go out and say and let the alumni and former players know that this is a program that they can be a part of still is huge for him. And eventually, he'll be on campus more than just for 48 hours, which is kind of how it's going to be for the next few weeks as Georgia continues their quest for a college football playoff championship. But those one-on-one meetings are going to be extremely integral, just to hear everybody out, basically like an interview at one point, like an entrance interview instead of an exit interview. So that'll be fun to follow and see how Lanning does in all of those, and just follow him throughout the spring as well. I think that for his introductory press conference, I know Matt kind of alluded to this earlier, where it's like it's not that hard to win one of these. I do feel like he overall said a lot of the right things and a lot of things that Oregon fans, alumni, and the current players and current staff want to hear.
Like Jared just said, he's not going to be here first signing day. He's probably, we assume, heading back to Georgia. He will be hosting some kind of signing day press conference, but because of technology and what have you, it's going to allow him to get back to the opportunity to coach Georgia in the college football playoff while hosting the signing day press conference for Oregon. He noted he's going to be doing double duty now. He's going to be working a lot of hours, a lot of work. And I think this is a guy that he loves. Erik, you brought up the processes. I think this is someone that just my first impression, he loves the processes. He loves the football work mentality. He loves all the grind. He mentioned how it's going to be a grind for multiple things. And I think those are the types of coaches, whether they're young or whether they're old, that if they have, like, if it's awesome for them to sit there and work through film or to network for recruiting purposes or to network for building a staff or, to scheme up stuff. Like, if that's what they find as fun, and that's the vibe I got with this guy, is those guys tend to always be successful. And he mentioned that one of the first things he said when he met Rob Mullins for the first time was, I got to get to work. I got to get to meeting the team, meeting the facilities, seeing everything, and getting myself on the ground running, to the point where he hasn't even called his parents yet. And it's like 3 days removed since he landed the job.
How about the quote he gave where he said, when I say the word football, my heartbeat picks up a little bit. You can just, those kind of comments, like, he's obviously, we talked about how he's been preparing for this. He's obviously probably in his mind been preparing how he's going to field questions in an introductory press conference like this. Like, yeah. I felt like that was the thing that stood out. You could see the passion. And like Matt was saying, like, it's easy to see. It's not hard. It would be almost impossible to miss this guy's passion for doing this. I watched a Football Scoop interview when he was a GA at Arizona State from 2012. And he told the story of why he wanted to get into coaching. I was going to ask this question, but I didn't get a third one because I wanted to hear more about it. But he said it came from his 7th grade PE teacher. And he always had a really fun time in this PE teacher's class. And he made everything fun, but he also made everything about competition. And those are that's what kind of led him to wanting to be a coach. And I think you can see this guy wants to be a teacher. He wants to lead and he wants to be in charge of putting everybody in the best position to be successful. And that is something that isn't always an inherent trait for everybody. Some people don't want to be leaders. Some people prefer not to be. He is not one of those people. And it's because of that somebody at 35 years old is in a position like this. What did Rob Mullins say over and over again? Gosh, 1 week ago when Mario Cristobal officially took the job and he was talking to media, they needed to find a leader. They needed to find somebody who would look out for the student athletes. That was at the forefront. Obviously, success on the football field is paramount. Recruiting is paramount. Getting the right people here is paramount. But ultimately, it comes down to what he talked about, which is he's a servant for these student athletes. It's him as a leader. And I think you get a sense of that. You don't have to be 50 years old and have 20 years of coaching experience to be a leader. You can be a leader with less than that. And I get the sense, and again, it's unfortunate because we only spoke to one football player today, and that player was Alex Forsythe, who told us he was at a DMV appointment, so he missed the speech. We couldn't get a reflection from anybody who watched it. But I would assume his ability to lead is something that's pretty palpable the first time you interact with him. And I assume the football players that were there came away feeling like we did, which is, okay, this guy gets it. This guy understands it. And this guy is going to do everything in his power to be successful here. And I wanted to just, maybe this is what I'll send to you, Jared, but just to transition a little bit. He was asked by Tyson Alger, I think his second to last question, about, is this, how long are you going to be here? The last two guys weren't here very long. What's your plan for that? How do you answer that? And I thought he was really impressive the way he handled that by saying, I think he made a joke of, I went to William Jewell College in Kansas. I'm not leaving that position. I'm not leaving this job for that job. And he said, Oregon has everything I have here that this will be. There's no reason it shouldn't be my long-term career job. I thought, he needed to be asked that question because, again, no ties to Eugene. I'd imagine
Right.
something he didn't ask. I'd imagine this might have been his first time in the entire state of Oregon, aside from maybe some recruiting visits. I don't know. But this is somebody who made it clear. I think he needed to make it clear on his opening press conference that this isn't a stepping stone job for him. He sees this as one of the best jobs in the country, and he said that.
Yeah, I mean, he began to answer that question with like something where it said, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking like you to earn my trust. And he said that to us, and apparently he said that to the players yesterday. But yeah, he knows where he's at. He knows that he's been working his entire life to get to an opportunity where he can be a head football coach at a major program. And I think Oregon recognized that as well. I think this is an opportunity that he's not going to try and turn away, that he's going to continue to do all he can and give his 100% and 110% to make this program better and make himself better. Again, he said something about, like he'll be in Eugene or he'll be at Oregon as long as Oregon wants him. And, for him, that's if he can continue to prove success and get Oregon to these next levels or continue to stay within these championship discussions, then Oregon's going to want him around for a long time. And again, this is always just a business, and that's always the great thing to say at an introductory press conference. But there is a passion behind that from him, where he understands the small upbringings that he's from. He mentioned William Jewell College. That college currently, or as of 2017, I looked this up yesterday, has a total enrollment of under 700 people. Yet he played football there. He was a high school football coach. He drove 13 hours to Pittsburgh and practically seemingly like pleaded for a graduate assistant job. And he's worked his whole way. He's worked his whole way up into this position. And to me, this seems like somebody who is going to continue to try and work his way up, even though he might already be there. Just a constant someone who's trying to prove somebody else wrong or just work to make himself better every day.
I think what really stood out to me was he was asked by Tyson that question of, there's a lot of people that are worried that if you have the success that you talk about, you're going to go. And it wasn't, his answer was not rooted in, hey, trust in me, but it was more, I have an opportunity to show you the trust in, that I need to earn your trust, that I'm not going to leave. And I thought that was pretty interesting, that he kind of flipped it back of, I need to prove to everybody that I'm not going to leave if some school comes calling, whereas everyone trusting him that he's not going to leave. And that was a really good answer for that question. And it's a valid one. And I'm appreciative that he answered that question as well. I just think overall, guys, this was, look, it's easy. Like we said at the beginning, it's easy to win the press conference, but you walk out of this and you see a guy that just seems successful, sounds successful, says the things that successful people do and say. And you walk out of this feeling confident that I don't know if this guy is going to come out and if he's going to win 11 games next season and Oregon's going to win the Pac-12 championship, but I feel very confident that it's going to be an operation that it's exciting. They're going to compete. They're going to work hard. They're going to do all the right things. And it's going to be exciting to see how this plays out. And this is someone that I think we're seeing kind of a new age right now in football where young coaches are coming up through the ranks. That Oregon has one of those guys. Will it play out in a successful manner? We don't know yet. But there's a lot of signs, a lot of people that he's worked for that believe in him that he will be a successful football coach. And so I can't think of any other feeling of being excited about the potential of this program where it's at right now with Dan Lanning.
Yeah, I think it's hard to come away with that. I mean, I was sitting here thinking of like, what did he say that maybe concerns me? And I don't know if there's really much of anything. I know you have concerns that you come into a press conference with. You have questions you want answered. I thought he answered everything pretty sufficiently that he was capable of answering. I mean, I didn't think he, skirted questions. We had an opportunity to introduce ourselves shortly after, and a quick exchange, but that was positive too, and it felt genuine. And I think one of the things, and I highlighted it in a story I wrote on Duck Territory on Sunday morning, kind of a deep dive into Dan Lanning, 5 reasons I think it's going to be a good hire. And one of the things I pointed to is just that he's known to be a highly relational player or coach and a player's coach. And I think even in small instances and interactions, you can sense that, I mean, I don't want to be too critical of the guy who was here before, but I don't think of too many times that Mario Cristobal took a moment to stop and say hi to us. I mean, it was pretty much business as usual. And I know obviously 4 years took place, and maybe there were some hurt feelings for things that were written or said by, he didn't have maybe the highest opinion of us by then. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking myself into circles here by bringing this up, but it felt kind of nice to be interacting with somebody who seemed like he was open to interacting with you, whereas that was not always the way it was with the previous coach, at least the last couple of weeks and months of his time here. I'll say that.
Yeah, this is to me, this feels like the program is in good hands. Again, answered everything that you would want to hear, which is always to somewhat be expected at an introductory press conference, but he handled himself well. And this should be somebody who excites Oregon fans going forward. Just his mentality and his overall, him as a person, he just seems like a genuinely good human. And I think that's important to have in any football program, to lead your team. And he is that type of leader. Again, there's a lot of dominoes that still have to fall in order to see where this program is come spring football. But I think it's on a good start. And I think the program is in good hands.
What comes next? Signing day is on Wednesday. Oregon will probably sign a couple guys. We'll get some comments from Dan Lanning. The fact that they're preparing to have a press conference tells us that at least one person is going to sign with Oregon.
They hold the press conference to it. Let us know no one signed, and maybe. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I asked Rob Mullins, Oregon's athletic director, about signing day, and just there is talk of maybe moving it to another time. And he had this really just like, you could tell in his face, like, I'm probably the last person you want opinions on because I'm biased, and because understandably so. But he said when things settle down and seeing how college football is shifting, he felt like there probably needs to be some kind of discussion for when this early signing period, if it all happens. But if it does, when does it happen? Because he noted that the first week in December, they were preparing for the Pac-12 championship games. They lost out on a recruiting weekend there. And then on Monday, Mario Cristobal left the football program. So then they were scrambling, trying to make the coaching hire, and couldn't have a recruiting weekend the last weekend before signing day. And one other note that we should note is it does sound like those tornadoes that happened back east impacted maybe a little bit of the timeline of getting a coaching hire made, because I guess Lanning's agent was based in the area that had some of those tornadoes sweep through, and they literally couldn't get in touch with him because of the communication lines were broke because of the tornado. So that plays a little bit of a factor into this process as well for how it played out. I should also note, these are all kind of streaming into my head as I speak this, but Mullins also talked about, when was an offer made, who spoke. And he said that they spoke with multiple people. The searches were running, and, with interviews were running parallel with multiple candidates, but they only offered one person the job officially. Contract terms were only sent to one person to review and then send back for adjustments or okays or no, this is not okay. And that was Dan Lanning.
Yeah. And that runs somewhat counter to the report from John Canzano from Sunday that Justin Wilcox, the California coach, was offered the job and turned it down. I don't know if we want to go too far. I don't think we should address the letter thing until a letter podcast. I think we should do at some point, because there's so much going on, guys. At some point, we should talk about this Twitter space thing, like devote 30 minutes, just how cool it is, some of the things we learned, because I think there's a whole community of things we could get into that are pretty cool around things that took place over the weekend. But this would be a 2-hour podcast, and we all have things to get done from a content perspective now. But no, I think those are interesting comments, Matt. And you do wonder how much of what we heard was real, how much of what we heard wasn't. And here's what I will say. A lot of that we will never know for sure, because people who were involved in it aren't going to talk on this publicly. We might hear from behind the scenes. I think we already have heard a decent amount of things that are kind of interesting. But we're not going to hear, oh, this is what happened with Kalani Sitake's interview, and this is what happened with Chip Kelly and Justin Wilcox and Lane Kiffin. Was he real? We're not going to get clarity from people on the record on those kind of things ever. Maybe when they retire, maybe someone does a tell-all, but like not anytime soon. So, I think people are always really interested in the process and how they got here. What Rob Mullins is willing to share and what Dan Lanning is willing to share, and maybe some of these coaches will say something about being a part of this, coaching search. We're going to be kind of left with more questions than answers, and that's okay. That's how it goes. I think at the end of the day, you just feel good because Oregon got its guy.
I don't know. Maybe somebody hops on a Twitter space and spills all the beans.
Maybe Rob Mullins can come in and just dump it
He's
all.
done that.
He has
done it.
There. It's crazy.
We'll start asking him, Rob, what happened with Kalani? Let us know.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on the Odds and Audibles podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. We'll be back later this week, getting you ready for signing day, getting you ready for what's to come from a recruiting standpoint, and then getting you ready for the Alamo Bowl, which needs to be played, and ultimately down the road, the opening era of Dan Lanning and where the Oregon football program goes with its next head coach. Until then, you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.